it's time for the visit with the person of high strangeness. We usually give you an opening shot. So today you got two lovely ladies, and we hope that's to your liking. I'm going to make some announcements. So if you like to set your VCR and tape this show, and the reason for that, my guest today, that is the fifth segment of some of the work that she does, and here shortly I'm going to re-air the first four parts that we did over the last few years, and eventually you might want to pull all of them together. So if you want to grab a tape and push that button while I make these announcements here. Again, I'd like to remind you that Peter Moon, the author of the Montauk series, is going to be in Olympia, Washington on August the 12th, 2002 at the Olympia Center. Is it the Columbia Center? It's on Columbia Street. At 7:30 on the 12th. And then if you miss him there, you can, actually it's the Olympic Center, I was right. And then if you miss him there, you can get a hold of him at the Quest bookstore in Everett on August the 14th. And that'll be a real treat because Mr. Moon doesn't travel very often. And we got two shows forthcoming with him. Then for myself, I'm going on the road here for a little while, and I think I'm done with that now. I'm going on the road for a little while, so I'm going to come back with a lot of footage for you and a documentary for Roswell. So we have a lot of special things planned for you. To remind you, we are airing some of the shows from a while back because they are now current issues. So. And the other thing is you might want to start taping because there's a good possibility that there come a time when we can no longer visit with you like this, and then you have them on record. So I'm going to introduce you to my guest, Katherine Peil. Hi, Katherine, how are you?
Oh, I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me back.
Well, you had left Washington State here for a while and got away from us. You did?
I did. I went to Michigan to study for a while and to kind of delve back into the science end of my work in emotion. I've been by myself studying and researching for quite a while, and then had been invited to come back into the academic community and see what they were up to. So it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I got to delve into not only what they're talking about emotion, all the different findings that they have in the theorizing that's the most latest wonderful stuff, but to go have access to the resource library to take the theory into the biological realm and look at a little physics and some of the new things that have come, including chaos theory, and it's all terribly exciting.
It is. Yeah, one of our, here's my famous pen, one of our ladies in the Michigan area, she called and she said to tell you thank you for having been willing to do all this so we can arrive at what we did.
Oh, how nice. You tell her thank you so much for caring about it. I do it more as a labor of love and a passionate mission so far than anything that that has been reflected as incredibly valuable so far. So we're working on that.
The name of today's show is called A Moral Compus. And so knowing how our mind works, trying to find out how mind works, define moral for me, please.
Well, the word moral has so many different meanings, and it's so loaded with all kinds of value judgments. But the word moral, the way I'm using it, is about morality. It's about right and wrong. And that's the core of what morality is in an ethical sense. The other piece of morality is right and wrong behavior. So it's like right and wrong choices of action. So good things to do and bad things to do. So that's kind of what morality is about.
So for the people that associate moral with either institutionalized religion per se or sexual morality, that's not what we're talking about today, is it?
Well, it is what we're talking about today, but what I want to suggest is that the advice that we've been given from institutionalized religion about morality has not been reflective of what actually occurs in nature. And there haven't, up until very recently, science has stayed so carefully away from anything of religious territory, including morality, that there's been a huge gap left in the whole arena of studying, understanding what universal human values are. And the fact is, there's plenty of evidence in nature, all the way up from the electromagnetic movement of matter, all the way up through the animal kingdom, to where you can see this progression of a beautiful moral system that exists within nature.
Now, the shot behind us, that's actually the one that you look at now.
My favorite.
That's actually chaos, and that is painted on the crop area.
Oh, that's so funny.
It came in as a crop circle. There's a lot of good things about chaos, would you say?
Well, that is officially known as the Mandelbrot set,
Right.
which is a fractal geometrical shape that says so much about the behavior in general, that it's a wonderful, beautiful mystery that has just been opened, and it's become the symbol for chaos, because science in general has the attitude that if you can observe something, you can figure out its mechanisms, and then you can predict how it's going to behave. And the whole idea of chaos threw a monkey wrench into that nice, tidy little system, because when they realized that no matter how many wonderful little rules you find, there's still unpredictable behavior. Unpredictable behavior they call it chaotic, because it breaks up the nice, tidy little order that reductionists like to find.
Little bitty order, yeah.
But the beauty about chaos is that when you really know what's going on, there's a higher order of determinism that accommodates both the predictability and the chaotic. And that's what the underlying principles really spring from, this higher level of organization that is comparable, if there is such a thing within nature as a super intelligence, or a god, if you will. It's those processes that you can see through these mathematical principles and through a lot of the wonderful new science that's out there. So there really isn't such a huge gulf anymore between science and religion. We just need to take some of the concepts that have been captive over in this field, bring them over here and look at what they mean against the evidence, and then really clean up some of these ideas. And there are great things to be found now in terms of spirituality. And that's what my work is about. In the emotional sense is basically the same thing that has been considered to be spirituality.
Now, to remind you, the other 4 segments that we did over the years, just to recap it, you started in your childhood, and we got to know you as a person, and then your system, and then we analyzed it, and then you showed us how to use it. And so then when Katherine came back this way, I said, oh, maybe you'll come again. Send me some notes. So, of course, she did. 67 pages.
That's the short version, by the way.
It's the short version. So here I went ahead and I studied the whole thing. And then the day before the show, she said, here's your questions. I didn't know that I just needed these questions, so I'm going to try to stick with them as much as I can.
Oh, please go with the flow, Lillian.
I will. And being who I am, of course, I'm going to start backwards. And one of the last things I went into in that 67 note.
My paper.
Your paper, thank you. She quotes, Katherine, you quote Dr. Martin Luther King, and he said that our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power, and we have guided missiles and misguided man, and how appropriate at this time. So can you take it from there, and then some kind of way we'll bend it back your way?
Yeah. Well, that's one of my favorite quotes, too, and I use it sort of at the end to cement what I've been talking about. But it's a great place to start, because it puts the idea of guidance and spirituality together, and the fact that whatever we're doing wrong, because we have guided missiles and misguided men. And what that means to me is that the kinds of spirituality that have come from the religious realm, which is almost the only kind of spirituality that we have learned about. And first of all, I want to say spirituality is something very, very deep and very meaningful to all of us, because what it breaks down to is sort of an understanding of how life works. A code to live by. What's right? What's wrong? What do I do? How do I make decisions? What's meaningful to me? What's purposeful? What's valuable? That's what spirituality is really about. And religion has defined that for us by saying, God knows what it is. Maybe he doesn't tell us clearly, but if we follow these rules, we'll be on the right track. Our destiny will unfold per his plan. But what the problem with that is, we are designed by, well, if you want to say we're designed by a creator, I'm a scientist, and I don't think of it that way, because that's not what the evidence is. The evidence is that we are all part of a co-creative process that falls into this wonderful system we'll talk about. But that.
Before I get too far away from it, clarify something for me, if you will. In the previous shows, we talked about the emotional intelligence system, and at that time, it almost sounded like we was talking more about mental health and things like that, and today we're flipping it to spirituality. Now, have you changed your mind on that, or did it just all?
That's a really great question. The reason that I'm using the word spirituality right now is because after going all the way back through the science, plowing back through all of this information, I realized that the reason that science doesn't know about this, the reason that emotion is thought about mental health and all of those things, and the reason I was uncomfortable saying what I really wanted to say without all of this other science first, was because the word spirit is kind of considered a dirty word.
A dirty word, yeah.
In science. So anything with supernatural connotations at all is something that science actively stays away from. And I've run into that. I mean, people's careers are threatened if they say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And so where I was before, I didn't want to alienate anyone by saying these things about, but now there's so much evidence out there that what we're talking about isn't supernatural at all, that we don't need to be afraid that it is, and we can put all the science together and say, this is nature, and nature has values that are not only recommended within the best traditions of the best moral guidance and the highest, most beautiful stuff you see across all major religions is right out of nature, and that's why it has arisen, because it is from our nature. On the other hand, there's a whole other aspect of this that does not understand a very important piece of our nature, namely what negative emotion is about. We have assumed that that is something bad and evil, and that's the mistake. That's the big mistake that's gotten us guided missiles and misguided men. That's the reason why we are driven by fear. We are victims of terrorism. Who are guided by anger and hate and resentment and pride and zeal, religious fervor, faith. These are all emotions that are making us do things. And if we're not aware how it's offering us guidance, if we're not letting our body and our mind work together in this guidance system, we end up with a level of morality lower than primates, the other primates, monkeys and chimpanzees.
That's pretty low.
You don't see them carrying Uzis to school and shooting their brothers and sisters, right? You see humans doing that, and what we have done is misused our mind by thinking that there's such a thing as good and evil, that suffering is good for the soul, and all of these things. We have gone off on a tangent evolutionarily that we did not need to do, and we need to recognize that we've done it and make some profound changes in how we think about things. And the very first idea is this dichotomy of good and evil, because it's a mistake.
It's a mistake. Yes, some of us, we've actually removed that word from our vocabulary.
Really? Yeah. How evolved of you.
Thank you. Well, see, because there's good and, negative and positive. But even the negative can be good because it makes the positive work.
Now, you are absolutely right on, because my whole journey, because when I was sort of discovered by these scientific people with the work that I was doing before, and so when I invited back into the community, I wanted to say, okay, I know that all emotion reduces to the positive and the negative categories that we experience through pain and pleasure. So there's this whole category of joy and trust and compassion and love that pulls us together and bonds us. Then there's this whole other category of mistrust and fear and hate and rage that pushes us apart. So what are these things really doing? I wanted to get at, okay, what is the guts of positive and negative? Because I know it's not good and evil. I know it's not good and evil, but I do know it somehow has to do with right and wrong biological states as per natural selection. So
no, let me clarify that. by natural, what did you call it?
Natural selection.
By natural selection. Now, what that's telling me is that no one person determines what's right and wrong. Am I hearing you correct?
Absolutely. Yes. When I say natural selection, as a scientist, that's what we understand is behind the organization of nature. Darwin had some of it right. There's a bigger piece that comes from the new science that fleshes it out. It makes sense of it. But natural selection implies that there are values against which it is using as criterion to select. And those are the values that lie beneath the positive and negative emotional poles. And in my journey of, I had to leave all of the psychology pretty far behind to trace it all the way back through biology and all the way back into physics and mathematics and geometry. But what it comes down to, and this is what I think is terribly exciting, is a fundamental association between the positive and negative electrical poles.
Right.
Okay? So we respond, we are electrical circuits, and we have these positive and negative things going on within us all the time at every level, whether it's the atoms, the electrons moving in the atoms of our body, the molecules that are bonded together by those atoms, and on and on and on. The chain of communication operates through electromagnetic processes.
Right.
So what it reduces to is that these categories of pain and pleasure root all the way back to positive and negative activity that is basically part of a breaking up and building down process. And when you get into the math of it, positive and negative, they both do both things.
Both things, right.
And they're both necessary, right, and good.
Yeah, for the friends that's really struggling right now, because our bodies are just being bombarded by the electromagnetic fields that's around the Earth. So for those of you that say, well, I don't see how that works together, it does. Just when you get up in the morning and you can't function.
Well, here's a little piece of advice for anyone that's worried about that. First of all, the worry alone is creating more negative electromagnetic regulatory distress. So every morning if you get up, feel the beautiful faith that your body is one with your mind, generate positive emotion. That's why there's religious ritual to connect and feel reverence. It fills your body with the right kinds of feelings. I can feel the goosebumps as I'm describing them now. That is more powerful than some of the fields around us. There's some exaggeration about that. But the beauty of it is recognizing that you see emotion. One of the reasons that scientists don't understand what it is, they think it's a response.
Yeah.
And it is a response because for every positive and negative electrical thing, there is a corresponding forward or backward magnetic movement. We're talking about electromagnetism. It's coupled together. So when we have an emotional response, we're having a response. But what I'm saying is it's because we have sensory stimulus. So when you think of it as a sense instead of response, it all begins to make sense because we're moving away from that which is not right for us, and we're moving toward that is what is right for us.
So is that on an individual basis, would you say, or as a whole?
Both, because it's a sense. So my sense is talking to me about me. It's relating my situation to my world. In fact, it is literally actualizing my identity. That's what this moral compass is doing. It's not just what to do that's right and wrong, so you can go to heaven or hell. It's helping you become who you can be in the very, very best, optimal value potential that you bear as a human being, and whatever else there might be that's stimulating, ultimately, this energy system.
Now, in one of the previous shows, you had given an example, because relationships are really taking a pounding right now also, is that each person has their own sensory system, and sometimes they don't go together, so we have to do you remember how you explained that?
Oh, heavens, no. But I can hopefully explain it better now.
Let me try to summarize it.
Okay.
And I think this is how it works, where you have to respect the other person in their reality, in their sensory system, in the emotions and how they feel. And then when theirs sort of doesn't go along with your own and it collides with you a little bit, just keep in mind they're doing their reality and I'm doing mine, and so we don't have to go into the trauma of the next person.
When you think about it as electrical resistance versus electrical acceptance and conductance, the beauty of when you recognize this electromagnetic thing, you can see that this simple force of positive, negative, attract, and repel is at work defining identity all the way up the chain. So when you get the idea of what identity is, when you have a relationship, you have one identity, two identities that are merged into a third identity. So the secret of keeping that bond is keeping positive emotion between you. So it's when now this is the beauty of, remember I said positive and negative relate to two important things of building up and breaking down. What they relate to in terms of your purposes and my purposes for self-actualization is the negative pole is about self-preservation. I need to pull back and away from any relationship that's compromising who I am as a person, what I can be as an individual. That's what the negative emotions are about. But we're not talking about all of them. We're talking about the basic emotions of fear, anger, and sadness and disgust. Those are like the primary colors. And when we use those as a sense, we pull back from the things in the environment that are not right for us. So we can think it, figure out what it is, and change it to reduce that stimulus so we don't have those feelings anymore. That's how that's supposed to work for our self-preservation. Now, what we've really missed, because hedonism is, even approaching pleasure is bad in the religious vernacular. Having any pleasure at all is bad, so is pain, so you can't win.
Hedonism, please.
Oh, hedonism is...
I didn't even say it right.
Hedonism, well, that's good that you don't know what it is, because it's a big concept within the Western Christian tradition that hedonism is someone who is amoral, that they're bad, they're lower than the rest of us because they simply pursue pleasure. They live to pursue pleasure, and that means that they can't control themselves sexually, they eat too much, they're drug addicts, and all of these things that all of us can easily fall into, finding things that feel good, trouble, but that they're also, the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain is what psychological hedonism is about. And all that is this attract and repel thing that I'm talking about. So hedonism, they say that it's evidence of evil and sin within nature, when nature is actually defining right and wrong states. So it's exactly the opposite of what they're teaching us.
Now, I'm not sticking with the question in case you haven't
noticed. We're doing... I'm glad that you're not.
One of the things that I saw in here, it made reference to the DNA, because as we know that this passing the buck thing that we have a tendency to do, so if we can blame this on something else, maybe not a person but something else, and so it talks about the DNA, but at the same token, it explains that it's not the DNA that's really, it's relevant, but it's not the driving factor here, but it's the cells. Can we go there for a minute?
Yes. I think what you're referring to is that, well, first of all, the dogma is that DNA is the source of everything.
Right.
It defines our body, it defines our personality, it defines our behavior.
Right.
And that the new science says that actually that's not the case. Not only is the DNA not, the nucleus of the cell is not the controlling brain of the cell.
Right.
It is simply following orders.
It is.
And where the orders are coming from is the external environment. And what I'm saying is that the stimulus that is stimulating, there's little receptor cells on the outside of the cell membrane. They're called self-identifying. I love that, because this whole thing is about self-regulation. And so there's signals coming in from the environment that are stimulating the cell that sends down and picks out the specific DNA that is necessary to do whatever task. And also, too, they found that DNA is not just one way, is that the signals from the environment literally are altering. There was a whole bunch of what they call junk DNA. They didn't know what it was, so of course it has to be junk, you know. So, but now there are all kinds of wonderful communication functions that are going on there, and even re-engineering functions, which is the way that we end up adapting to our environment and in a way that gets remembered in the DNA. So this interactive system is profoundly important. And what I'm saying is that we participate consciously in it via our emotions. So when we experience an emotion, it is a message from the atoms, the molecules, the cells, the organs, and everything synthesized within our body. And all we have to do is recognize, okay, I'm in a defensive mode right now. Do whatever you need to change the environment, or I am in a growth mode right now. That's the beauty of understanding what positive emotion is about. Because we talked about self-preservation, but the whole other side of that is self-development. And these are the two things that have to fit together in a balanced way in order for us to be right as a human being. So the more negative emotion we experience, the more we are not in the balanced state. But the beauty of the difference is they both tie into, at a higher level, they tie into positive and negative feedback. One of them is supposed to be reduced, which is negative emotion. The other one is supposed to be built, amplified, and saved. So we're supposed to design a mind and a world that brings out the most complex emotions on a positive, and it keeps us in that mode all the time. So the more I experience love, gratitude, loyalty, faith, trust, the more I am living the right way. And I'm connected to other people through those feelings. It bonds us together, just like the bonds between cells that make organs, the bonds between organs that cooperate in a system.
Well, that sounds really.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, yeah, you did. And I was really paying attention. And so my mind, you know, actually, a friend of mine, she said the other day, quit talking in shorthand, she called it, because my mind goes from here to here. Now, so what you were explaining here was we're each in control of our own spirituality and emotions and all of this.
Emotions are regulating us.
Us.
We should not be regulating them or suppressing them in any way. They're delivering the guidance that we need. The guidance.
Okay, so I'm going to learn this, and you already know this. And
I'm always learning it too.
Yeah, so now
So
you have
another
person over here that when you're in one of those negative states, you don't have time to explain all this.
You don't have time at all, because that person is in a state of consciousness where their mind is less involved. Their body's in charge because the mind has fallen down at the job. The body has to sweep in with self-preservation. And see, that's the huge problem right now that we have misguided men, is that we've created so much. We're supposed to reduce the situations that bring negative emotion, but we have increased it profoundly by not understanding what it is, trying to say that it's something left over from our animal heritage we have to push away with our mind. It's the only thing that guides our mind. It's the thing that actually gives rise to consciousness, which is another one of the things in there.
Yeah, that's actually how you started off with, but in the meantime, you know, I think it might take longer for us to teach people that and put it in practice. And we might not live long enough to see it work on a planetary.
Well, I'm a little more optimistic than that. I have to be. But the first thing that I found is that since we've been taught from such a young age these different kinds, you know, values are supposed to come from laws and codes and religious people and from God. They don't come from within. It makes us suspect our own system. And then so when our emotions tell us the truth that we need to hear and we don't understand what it is, we push them away. So what I found, and I was very amazed to find out the depth of this problem, is that people don't even really experience the emotional sense like we can because it's been so suppressed. And personally, I have a little bit of an extra power there because I was born very nearsighted. So I think that I compensated with that sense.
Sitting in the crevices, if memory serves me right, you was sort of withdrawn, but.
Oh, yeah. Because there was always so much stimulus in the room. I could feel things that I knew were information. I wasn't sure how to process it or what to do with it. And I thought for many years that it was, you know, what they call psychic power. And what that is, I think, certainly in my sense, is an acuity to this emotional sense. Because the more you use it in your life, the more you make the changes it's asking you to change, the broader your consciousness becomes. And it gets to the point where you can read someone's emotions better than they even know they're aware of them. Because since there's always an approach and an avoidance response, it's happening whether they're aware of it or not. So you can see if someone's with you or against you, given the emotions that come off of them. And you can get to the point where you can feel the electricity of it. So it makes for a very interesting room experience.
It does, yeah.
I think a lot of shy people have some of that going on as well. Because they're very sensitive to all of the cues a lot of other people maybe aren't attuned to.
Now, I had taken a yellow marker and marked a lot of things here, but so have you. So is there anything in here that you really need to go to?
Not really so far. What I have in here are a bunch of comparisons. Like the word, we talked about how the word spirit is used, and I have a comparison between the word emotion, spirit, and soul, because there's so much overlap, and that if you come down to the spirit, one's mood or emotional state is down here as a lesser, and soul says the same thing. The emotional state in nature as distinguished from mind and intellect. But also, too, the difference is you have these supernatural connotations, and you have that, well, soul is in humans, but spirit isn't in humans, it's in everything else. So you take all of that supernatural stuff and religious stuff and put it in the word soul, everything that's left over is the emotional sense.
Now define supernatural for some of the friends that think that's a lot of hocus pocus.
Okay. Well, science thinks anything supernatural is all hocus pocus. And what the supernatural, the way that it's used kind of in a scientific way, is that anything that doesn't have a physical basis.
Metaphysical.
Anything that can't be observed, anything that doesn't have some sort of a physical basis in the universe is supernatural. So anything that can't be proven and all this, but now recognizing that everything is made of energy and that there's information in energy, it sort of brings together the idea of higher knowledge, higher wisdom, information coming from above or below or from within or somewhere, and it's not a supernatural concept anymore at all. In fact, if you put the pieces together from physics and science and biology, it's all completely and beautifully natural, and yet there is this wonderful guidance system that's just part of our evolution. It all evolved out of the basic electromagnetic forces of all matter, and the way, if we can literally, we're sensitive to these things, we can build these, well, I can get into the chaos of it, but it's a wonderful thing, and we're all perceptually attuned through this simple positive and negative pole. Whether we experience it through these beautiful complex tones like humans do, or if it's something just as simple as a reflex, because you're able to take that stimulus. Each one, what is happening all the way up is it's literally defining identity. So it's this stimulus response. If you're perceiving something, it's the energy stimulus that you're taking. It defines your identity as well as the response, the behavior. That sounds a little complicated when you think about.
I'm going to it in my mind here. I'm trying to break it down just a little here.
Well, let's break it down in chemistry.
Can we have a for instance here? What you just said.
For instance,
please.
If basic chemistry tells us that if you look at the periodic table, the chart with the atomic weights, and that this is hydrogen, this is oxygen. Right. The identity, the difference between, if I call them self units, because you're a self unit, I'm a self unit, the molecule in my toe is a self unit, the atom within the molecule is a separate self unit. I like to think of them as micro, mini, macro cells, because each bigger one is made up of smaller ones. That it all the way down to the atomic level. The only thing that distinguishes one kind of atom from a different kind of atom is the electron activity. So if the electrons in an oxygen molecule are not balanced, there's a number of protons and a number of electrons that balance. And when they're in balance, that's an oxygen atom. But when another electron either adds or goes away, it's an ion. It has this positive and negative attractive force. And so we're talking about change, the change of the universe. Every time it's happening, we experience emotion, or whatever sort of conscious experience happens when there's this energy exchange process. So an oxygen atom can be an ion, or it can choose to be in this or that, but these choices are regulated by the electron movement, which I'm saying is perceivable through an emotional sense. It leads all the way up. So the self is a very important concept here, because it comes down to the chemical identity. Now, the chemical identity of Lillian is the combination of all kinds of oxygen atoms and carbon atoms and all of these wonderful things that are all held together in a shape called Lillian. And yet every one of these things added together has a unique chemical composition that's you and only you. So that's your identity. But as we interact with our environment through this perceptual system, and we respond the way we're supposed to, we stay oriented and together as Lillian. That's the only way that our identity as a whole knows that we're all on the same page.
Maybe.
And the beauty of this, when you realize what's happening with positive and negative emotion, the more your identity expands to include other people, places, things, concepts across space and time, the happier you are. And the more broad your empathic resonance is, you know how to think and act in every moment to treat not only yourself properly, but this every other self that you're in a relationship with. So it's an expansion of identity. that you can actualize the best potential of you by connecting and networking with the biggest, broadest amount of people that you possibly can, that you can touch emotionally and that you can care about in every one of your own choices and thoughts and actions.
So having said all that, now, the times we live in, people are in fear. Really,
Sure they are.
Big time. And
are we connected as a species? Do we feel?
I'm not even sure. Sometimes I feel, but we have very many antisocial, and that's not a negative thing here either. It's just people that's just afraid
they have to protect
interact
themselves
with people. Right, it's a protection. So what do we do?
So what are we
with
protecting
them
ourselves
or
from,
for
do you
them?
think?
Yeah.
Are we protecting ourselves from evil supernatural forces? Are we protecting ourselves from sin? No. We are protecting ourselves from one another.
From one another.
Yes. And in doing so, my fear of you pulls me away. And that makes you mistrust me because I'm likely to self-serve instead of make a decision that's going to satisfy my larger self, which includes you. But every time I make a decision, if I'm connected to you in any way that affects me in a positive way and you in a negative way, I'm going to feel bad about it later on. So that's more pain back on me. In the long term, to build the strategies that leave the lingering signals of compassion, trust, love, faith, those are all the right things to do because that's what nature is asking us to do. That's what we need to do. So when we realize not only are we one species, we are a brotherhood of human beings. We're not females, we're not males, we're not Christians, we're not Africans, we're not blacks, we're not whites. We are one species. We are not only just one species, we are connected to every other material thing in the entire universe or universes, as the case may be. And through that connection, that energy connection between all of us, this positive and negative thing is going on everywhere. And the only way we can stay connected and be evolving however our maximum destiny is by recognizing this commonality and going for the positive emotion that everyone experiences within.
Now, given the times that we live in, hypothetically speaking, let's say something happens and we have 20 people that need to all stay together in one room. I don't know how big, not very big. What would you say to them real quick in order to make this work for over a period of time?
What do you mean, have them work together as a group or have them?
Yes, if all of a sudden circumstances change and you have to have 20 people in a small room over a longer period of time. So very quickly, walk up to them in your mind and say, okay, you're all going to be stuck here together for, we don't know how long.
Here's the rules.
Here's
the moral rules. Don't do anything that creates pain and do everything that creates pleasure, both for you and for everyone else. That's the simple rule. That's the simple moral code of life. Don't do anything that creates pain. In any situation that creates pain, reduce it. You have the cultural power to build things, change the situations in the environment that create pain. You're doing that by your show. You're spreading information. You're helping people become aware of certain things. You're entertaining. You're doing that. But you're also, you're building pleasure. And the things that what it comes down to, that encoded in every emotion is all the information you need about what to fix and why to fix it. And
now, but the people that we're sending to this imaginary room
in the 20 minutes, yeah.
They have the need for a leader because that's how they were encoded for so long. So then when we tell them, well, don't do anything to...
Well, you tell them this. Everything that everyone does to one another, let them know if you like it or not. We do anyway through subtle cues.
Right.
But if they're explicitly aware of it, then they'll know what they can do and what they can't do in order to cooperate in the group.
So they don't need a leader? That's what you're saying?
No, not really. As long as everyone knows the same rules. That's what leadership is about. Now, leadership to share common goals is important. Leadership is very important because, like the body has to lead. The brain is the leader of the body. The consciousness is the leader of the brain, hopefully. But that in order for everything to be organized, and there needs to be some sort of central distribution of information and collection of information. And once that's happening for everyone, leadership becomes, everyone knows what their piece is in the whole. And because it's divine, and leadership is not about power mongering, and it's not about what it's turned into.
And so, in other words, to kind of round it out here, it's a campus. At least they give you general direction maybe doesn't detail everything, but it'll tell you which direction to go, and comes from within yourself.
If you basically follow that and you learn from what happens when you respond certain ways and the negative emotion asks you to do this or do that, then you cannot help but develop the optimal strategies, the optimal ideas, the optimal beliefs that will allow you to get about and meet your needs in as many environments as possible with as many people supporting you as possible, and vice versa.
Now I'm going to inject something here. Now that you have spent that time with the scientists and all the work that you have done, do you look at things different? What did it do for you, and where are you going?
Well, it was a wonderful experience to go back in the scientific direction, because I've always known that what I'm talking about is firmly based in science. And not only that, I experience it every day in my own experience, and that. But going back into the scientific, not only, well, the most important thing is to share these ideas within the scientific community, because that's where they belong. This stuff should come out of science. I'm a scientist. However, well, what I plan on doing, in fact, the piece that I have there is rather all-inclusive, but I'm going to introduce in the scientific community through a publication emotion as a sense. So we'll start thinking about it as a sense, and then I'm going to spend some time with chaologists and talk to them about how this system, what I'm talking about as emotion over here, is actually part of this self-regulatory code that underlies all of this organization that we see. We find from, there's a wonderful new book by Stephen Wolfram called A New Kind of Science, where he talks about how simple rules come up with really complex behavior. And of course, I'm talking about behavioral regulation, and the simple rule that's underlying everything is positive, negative, approach, avoid.
At the end of the show, and somewhere along here, we've been showing your webpage. Is some of that available on the webpage, or do we have to wait for this here?
Unfortunately, I need to update my website. I've made a lot of progress really fast, which is wonderful for me. But I do. Anyone that's interested in reading the science of this, I'm happy to send them the paper that I have now. There is good stuff up on my website. I certainly. The old seminar book that I had is, I don't have it in downloadable form yet, and I'd love to have people just go and get it. As it is, I still have to print it and mail it, so I have to charge a little for that. But it's it's a good guide to start thinking about these things. It's a little bit more complex than I need to be now that I have the whole concept of spirituality. I was avoiding it before because as a scientist, you're supposed to do that. But now we really are talking about morality. We're talking about natural values and natural innate spirituality, and religious spirituality is a different thing entirely.
It's a different thing entirely, yeah. I find in my travels, I ask the people to define religion and then spirituality, and sometimes they real close, and sometimes they real, distant. And then, because it's important when we use a word, if everybody has the same definition, because if we don't, something gets lost in translation.
Well, we have a lot of problems with language, and part of it is because we don't understand certain principles and certain values and certain things that are existing in nature that would make the explanations much more clear, like emotion. That's caused so much confusion in our not knowing. Well, another one of the things I have here is the linguistic difference between right and wrong. Look how many words we need to talk about what right is, and how many nature is very clear about what's wrong. What's right is much more personally driven, because each one of us has different value potentials to develop. What's right is much more flexible, but what's wrong is reducing threats, reducing losses, reducing obstructions and injustices and unwholesome things in our environment. It's very clear cut. If we do that, we're evolving properly. If we don't do that, we come up with all kinds of complex negative emotions that never should have evolved. Negative emotions like shame and guilt and arrogance and contempt and rage and hate. Things that we think are normal are actually perversions of a beautiful moral system that we lost touch with. In fact, there are monkeys that are at least at our level of morality. And it's we need to go back and see. They're actually at the bonobos, and even chimpanzees have developed levels of trust that underlie the entire cooperative social cohesion, because humans are a social animal. In fact, some of the things that we do right now go all the way back to reptilian behavior, like territoriality. We are not territorial. We shouldn't be anymore. We share the planet as one species, and our mind helps us to know that. One of the really huge things that comes out of this is negative emotion is about competition. Self-preservation makes us competitive, puts us in win-lose situations against one another, where positive emotion, being motivated by that, leaves us in a completely different realm where we're cooperative, and that's where all the culture and creativity and synergy, and that's where the real guidance is in cooperation. But as Americans, one of the things we consider that makes America great is competition, because we're real confused about what that is. In fact, the thing with Microsoft is a really great example, because competition means somebody wins and somebody loses, and that since there's the way to lose, then the best price is going to fall out. But what it really is a cooperative system. We all agree upon these rules. And everyone usually, I mean, you don't go down the street and shoot the guy who's selling milk because you want to sell milk on this corner. What you do is you each have your own niche. So they come to you because you're closer, they come to you because you're less expensive, and it's cooperation. It's not win-lose, all-out competition, or there's a law against it. So we should not be competing, and we think that the fact that Microsoft won in a competition shouldn't happen because that's a monopoly. And we're very confused about what competition and cooperation are.
That's interesting you brought that up. I'm getting ready to go on the road to do some on-location shoots. And sometimes I'll ask people the same question all throughout the country. So we went to Tomwater, Washington, and asked a person a question, how he was viewing the world and things that had happened. And Microsoft was one of the things he talked about. And he said, but the thing is here, that's where the click and point came from. It was designed for everyday people, so we could learn. He said, now all of a sudden, everybody is in competition to get to that point, and that's where the problem comes in. And having said that, we're still very vulnerable right now as a people. Do you think we've learned anything?
I really hope so. But in addition to the fact that we are cooperative instead of competitive, which means that we are supposed to come up with win-win solutions to everything and not win-lose, the second thing of that is we're not supposed to have hierarchies. Dominance hierarchies should have been left behind with the chimpanzees. In fact, there are monkey cultures that understand social cooperation that don't have dominance hierarchies. We shouldn't have them anymore. And that's one of the reasons why we create this so much extra negative emotion. If you'll notice, you think about the difference between someone that we admire is higher than us. Someone who we are hold in contempt is lower than us. Someone who is an inspiring mentor wants to pull us up to his level. Someone who is arrogant we want to pull him down. That's how the emotional system is equalizing. The truth that comes out of this is that we are all equal. We need to have equal freedom, equal opportunity to self-regulate, to follow our emotions and to learn who we are and to develop as nature makes us. And if our mind interferes, we're just really messing up the works. But yet, when you look all around us, we have nothing but hierarchies. We have hierarchies in government. We have them in, we have nice little pecking order of who has the most money and who has the most opportunity. And it's the people up here are always going to be pulled down by the anger of the people down here. That's what anger is, self-protective.
Now, refresh my memory here. I believe it was you. What we do in the show, we try not to give titles because we're all equal. We want to be people. And I believe it was you that had a phone call from a lady demanding to know your qualifications. Do you remember
that sounds familiar.
That was you.
That sounds familiar.
And then after you gave all your qualifications, she was okay with that.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
do you remember that?
Yeah, that's funny. But see, that's it, is that we have, so permeates how we live and breathe and how we're taught. In fact, the whole academics, that's another reason that science hasn't really found out what a sense is yet, is that there's such a pecking order and such elitism within the scientific community that somebody that has the audacity to have a new model before they've gone through all the training and all, you're not supposed to have a creative idea until you're at the end of your career, is that they are literally scorned and avoided by those that have played the game by the rules. And that's why throughout history there have been time after time after time where somebody has had a new model that did prove to be right hundreds of years later, and that they were laughed out of town, they were ridiculed, they were in some cases murdered, and hopefully we're evolved beyond that point. But it really does take some conviction and some good hard evidence to say the things that I want to say and that need to be said, because other people are just really not looking at them very much at all. Emotion is still considered to be a response instead of some sort of a sensory system, and it's a response. It's a throwback to the animal kingdom that has to be suppressed and regulated. There are over 90 plus definitions of what emotion is in the scientific community, and no guidance whatsoever about how to use it.
On how to use it, yeah.
And over here we have guidance that tells us emotion is evidence of sin. It makes us pull toward pleasure, and it makes us create pain, and it's just a mess. So follow these rules and you'll be all right. And so neither one of them. Absolutely. The only way anyone can control anyone else's behavior is if they are instilling negative emotion and manipulating it. And if you want to guard against that, negative emotion is a signal of, all of those complex ones are a signal of belief systems that we need to change in our mind. Because remember, we're supposed to change the things in the world to get rid of those basic primary ones. The secondary ones are about the mind. So if you're changing all the things in your world that make you feel angry, that make you feel sad. Okay, sadness is about losses. You lose something, you build a replacement. Your house burns down, you build it again. Your spouse dies, you find another one. You know, it's about replacing things. You're not supposed to hang out in sadness. And we have epidemic depression because we think suffering is good for the soul.
That's right, yeah. See, because here again, mind control, you know. As long as you stay in check in this life, in the next life you will be...
The United States has been controlled by terrorists since September 11th because of fear. They're manipulating us through fear. But they're doing it because they're motivated by the anger of what they perceive to be injustice. And it's true. There is an imperialism that is put forth by somebody that puts themselves up as a superpower. We're the only culture that has ever used nuclear weapons, by the way. So they are shaking in their shoes. We want to be mighty and strong, and yet that's just a way of dominating someone else.
Someone else. I'm changing the subject again. We have just a few minutes left. I don't remember if I inquired about your mother. Have I done that already?
Not officially, but
well, officially, how's your mother?
Oh, my mother. She's a wonderful woman, and she's recovering very well from quadruple bypass surgery. And your support throughout that was really nice. She is a wonderful woman who inspired me on many levels. She's a poet at heart. And she wrote a poem called "No Instructions Come With Its Machine" that talks about how joy pulls us to the, it's just beautiful. And she's been an inspiration in my life. In fact, in my workbook, the poem is in there. She's doing a lot better. And
you can't pull it off the top of your head real quick, can you?
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I can't.
You can't.
I'm not as good with words as I'd like to be, because the thought process is required to get where I'm at with the emotion, unfortunately, seems to be at odds with words sometimes. So that's a struggle for me. It's a great poem. I can pull it out. It's probably right in that book.
Well, if we have time for it, can I get to that book? Which one is it? What is it called?
Well,
just don't hang yourself here. We can do this. You got it?
Look at that.
Okay, we got it.
In honor of my mother, I would be happy to read this poem.
Cool, yeah. See, that was easy.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah.
Now, I hope it is in here. No, it's called "No Instructions Come With This Machine." Off the assembly line of the universe we roll, one to a customer mostly, umbilical to other beings like tangled roots. We are hungry, wired for joy and pain. No instructions come with this machine. Listen, the eternal adventure speaks from inside. Trust your equipment. Your compass points to joy. Breath connects us to the sky, where stars on incandescent journeys stoke the furnace of our mutual dream.
Now, there's no way we could have, come to full terms with this show. This was just very incredible. Yeah.
I'm honored to have had her as my mother. She helped facilitate my mission and help me discover what it was about. And that poem will always be one of my very favorites. So thanks for asking. She's a very special lady.
Yeah. So what's next for you? I already asked that, but can you give me some real specifics for the areas that you're going to be in?
Well, I've been invited to speak at a conference of chaologists. So we didn't really talk much about chaos theory, but the implications of having an emotional sense and what it means all the way back here is, here I've been walking backward, and these people have been walking forward with the same ideas about behavior, regulation, and why is sometimes it's set, why sometimes it stays, one times it's chaotic. It's all about this thing. So to have what I'm saying really helps bridge, meet the twain from where they're coming. So I'm hoping to be able to go down there and share some of these ideas with them.
Where's down there? We have like 2 minutes.
Oh, it's a conference. It happens to be held in Portland this year.
In Portland.
But what I really want to do is finish these papers, get them out to the science, and then get back to the business of putting this in a language people can understand. And after everything I've done, there's a very quick, easy, brief, moral guidance that if you just use this, the understanding's full from that. So that's the focus where I'm going to be doing next, doing something more public. And of course, there's a big book in here at some point as well.
Well, yeah, either way, you're going to have to come back before you do the book, because I know in your own way, you're perfectionist and you're always fixing it. Even though when they're done, I hear music. Thank you for coming, Katherine.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So much for having me. You are one of my favorite people.
Same.
It's part of why our planet wasted. And if we do our part and use our heart, we'll fill our mission we've had from the start. Miss Lillian, we'd like to thank you for all the fun while you took us here and you took us there. And it is just because you
Thank you.